I used to work night shifts at a 24-hour Walmart in rural Tennessee about 5 years ago. The job wasn't glamorous, but the overnight differential pay helped with my college expenses, and I actually preferred the quieter atmosphere compared to the daytime chaos. My shift typically ran from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., and I was responsible for stocking the grocery section. Most nights were uneventful. Just me, my coworkers, and the occasional late-night shopper looking for medicine or snacks. One particular Tuesday night in October started like any other. The store was practically empty after midnight, with maybe 5 or 6 customers wandering the aisles. Around 2 a.m., I noticed a middle-aged woman shopping in my section. She seemed on edge, constantly looking over her shoulder as she selected items. I didn't think much of it initially. Night shoppers are often a bit more alert by nature, As I was restocking the cereal aisle, she approached me, her shopping basket clutched tightly against her chest. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think someone is following me around the store." I straightened up and glanced around. "Did you see someone specific?" She nodded. "A man in a blue jacket has been behind me in every aisle for the past 20 minutes. When I stop, he stops. When I move, he moves." I told her I'd keep an eye out and suggested she stay near the front registers where more employees were stationed. She thanked me and hurried off toward the checkout area. I continued stocking, but kept glancing up and down the aisles. Sure enough, about 2 minutes later, I spotted a man in a blue windbreaker at the end of the cereal aisle. He was pretending to look at products, but his attention was clearly focused toward the front of the store where the woman had gone. When he noticed me watching him, he abruptly turned and walked away. Something about his behavior set off alarm bells, so I radioed my manager and described the situation. My manager said he'd reviewed the security cameras and asked me to continue my work, but stay alert. About 15 minutes later, my manager's voice came through on the radio. The woman just checked out and is heading to her car. The man in the blue jacket left right before her without buying anything. He's now sitting in a pickup truck at the far end of the parking lot. Our store had a policy about employee safety and customer escorts, so my manager asked if I would accompany one of our security personnel to make sure the woman got to her car safely. I agreed and met our security guy, Dave, at the front entrance. We stepped outside. We could see the woman loading her groceries into a sedan about 50 yards away. The parking lot was mostly empty, but under a burned-out light at the far end sat a dark-colored pickup truck with its headlights off. Even from that distance, I could make out the silhouette of someone sitting in the driver's seat. Dave and I walked to the woman's car and explained that we'd noticed the man watching her and wanted to make sure she got out safely. She looked visibly relieved and thanked us repeatedly. As she got into her car, Dave took out his phone and made a show of photographing the pickup truck's license plate. Cut. The truck's engine suddenly roared to life, and it peeled out of the parking lot, tires squealing. The woman drove away safely, and we thought that was the end of it. But when we returned inside, my manager called us into the office. Akia reviewed more of the security footage and discovered something truly disturbing. The man in the blue jacket had entered the store right after the woman, which initially seemed to confirm he was stalking her. But upon closer inspection of earlier footage, we realized he had actually been waiting in his truck for over 2 hours before she arrived. He had watched at least 3 other female shoppers come and go before settling on following her. Even more unsettling, when security zoomed in on footage of the man's truck, they could see what appeared to be a duffel bag, rope, and what might have been duct tape on the passenger seat. The police were called, and they took the security footage. About 2 weeks later, we learned that the same truck had been spotted in connection with an attempted abduction at another store about 30 miles away. They eventually arrested the man after linking him to 2 other stalking incidents in the area. I still work retail, but I've switched to day shifts, and whenever I'm in a parking lot at night, I can't help but scan for pickup trucks sitting under burned-out lights, their drivers waiting patiently for the right person to walk out alone. I've always been somewhat of a germaphobe, so public restrooms are basically my nightmare. I avoid them whenever possible, but sometimes nature calls at inconvenient times, like when you're at Walmart at 8 p.m. with your weekly groceries in the cart. This happened last year at a Walmart supercenter in suburban Chicago. I had just finished my shopping and was heading to check out when I realized I really needed to use the bathroom. With a sigh, I parked my cart near the front of the store and headed to the restroom in the back. As I pushed open the door to the women's restroom, I immediately noticed two things. First, it was surprisingly clean for a store restroom, and second, it was completely empty. There were 5 stalls, and all the doors were open except for the handicap stall at the end. I could see someone's feet under the door. I took the stall farthest from the entrance, but still a couple down from the occupied handicap stall. As I was sitting there, I heard a strange scratching sound coming from the direction of the occupied stall. It was rhythmic, almost like someone dragging their nails across the metal divider. Scratch, scratch, pause, scratch, scratch, pause, over and over. I tried to ignore it, but after about a minute, the sound changed. Now it sounded like whispering, but I couldn't make out any words. Just a low, continuous murmur punctuated by occasional giggles. I started to feel uneasy. The feet I could see under the stall hadn't moved at all since I entered. Just as I was finishing up, the lights in the bathroom flickered momentarily. In the brief second of darkness, the whispering from the handicap stall got noticeably louder, then immediately stopped when the lights came back on. I hurried to wash my hands, keeping my eyes on the reflection of the handicap stall in the mirror above the sink. That's when I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The feet I could see under the stall door weren't touching the ground. They were dangling a few inches above the floor. I dried my hands as quickly as possible and was about to bolt for the door when it swung open. A Walmart employee in a blue vest walked in. She nodded to me with a tired smile and headed for an open stall. Before she could enter it, I grabbed her arm. "There's someone in the handicap stall," I whispered. "I think something's wrong." The employee looked confused, but walked over and knocked on the handicap stall door. "Hello, are you okay in there?" No response. She knocked again, louder this time. "Store management, is everything all right?" Still nothing. She turned to me with a frown. "How long have they been in there?" "At least as long as I've been here, maybe 10 minutes. But their feet aren't touching the ground." The employee's eyes widened, and she immediately took out her walkie-talkie. "I need a manager to the women's restroom for a wellness check," she said urgently. Within minutes, a male manager arrived. After confirming that the stall was still occupied and unresponsive, he made the decision to look over the top of the stall door. As soon as he peered over, he stumbled back, his face draining of color. "Call 911, he told the female employee, his voice shaking. "Right now." They ushered me out of the bathroom before I could see what was in the stall, but as the door was closing behind us, I caught a glimpse of what looked like someone in dark clothing hanging from the metal hook on the back of the stall door. I later learned from local news that a 19-year-old woman had taken her own life in that bathroom stall. She had been reported missing by her parents 3 days earlier after leaving a concerning note. Somehow, she had managed to enter the store during a busy period, go into the bathroom, and take her life without anyone noticing. The store's cleaning staff had apparently been marking the stall as out of order for days rather than checking why it was locked. But what still haunts me, what I can't explain, is the scratching sounds and whispering I heard. According to the medical examiner, the young woman had been dead for at least 48 hours when she was found. Whatever made those sounds in that stall while I was there, it wasn't her. I worked at a 24-hour Walmart in Nevada for about 8 months during my sophomore year of college. The location was on the outskirts of Las Vegas, not too far from the desert. It was one of those massive supercenters that sold everything from groceries to car parts. Since I was taking classes during the day, I worked the overnight shift from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m., usually 3 nights a week. The job mainly involved restocking shelves, unloading delivery trucks, and occasionally helping the few customers who came in during those hours. Most nights were pretty uneventful. The hardest part was staying awake. My department was electronics, which was located near the back of the store. During overnight shifts, the electronics counter was closed, but I still had 2 stock items in that section. One of the perks of working there was that we had a wall of TVs that were always on, usually playing the same movie or show on a loop. It made the long nights a little less boring. About 3 months into the job, strange things started happening during my shifts. It began with items being moved from where I had just stocked them. I'd place a row of video games on a shelf, turn around to get more from my cart, and when I looked back, they'd be in a completely different arrangement. At first, I assumed it was other employees messing with me, or maybe even customers I hadn't noticed. Then, one night, around 3 a.m., I was in the stockroom taking inventory when I heard what sounded like a child giggling somewhere in the aisles of toys nearby. In a 24-hour Walmart, it's not unheard of for people to bring their kids in at odd hours, but it was definitely unusual. I stepped out of the stockroom and looked down the toy aisle. It was completely empty, but I could still hear the faint sound of a child's laughter. I walked through several aisles, checking for the source of the noise, but found nothing. Just as I convinced myself I was hearing things due to fatigue, one of the large stuffed animals on a top shelf fell to the ground right in front of me. There was no way it could have fallen on its own. It had been pushed well back on the shelf. I mentioned these occurrences to a coworker named Luis, who had been there for several years. Instead of laughing it off like I expected, he nodded knowingly. That section of the store used to be an empty lot before they expanded, he told me. There was an accident there maybe 15 years ago. A family's car broke down, and they were waiting for help when another car swerved off the road and hit them. The parents survived, but they lost their little girl. She was about 6 years old. I'm generally skeptical about ghost stories, but over the next few weeks, the incidents became more frequent and harder to explain away. Price tags would be rearranged to spell out words like play or hi. Children's toys would be found activated in the morning, despite being packaged in boxes that required opening. Most disturbing were the small handprints that would sometimes appear on recently cleaned display cases, too small to belong to any adult. Strangest experience happened about 2 weeks before I quit. It was around 4 a.m. and the store was completely empty of customers. I was restocking the video game section when all the TVs on the display wall suddenly changed channels simultaneously. Instead of the usual promotional content, they all showed static with faint shapes that seemed to be moving in the background of the snow. As I stood there trying to figure out what technical glitch could cause this, the static on every screen formed into what looked like the silhouette of a small child. It lasted only a few seconds before the screens returned to normal, but I wasn't the only one who saw it. A cashier who was walking by stopped dead in her tracks and stared at the wall of TVs. "Did you see that?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I nodded, unable to speak. "That's the 3rd time this month," she said, before hurrying back to her register. The final straw came during my last week. I was alone in the electronics section around 2 a.m. when the temperature suddenly dropped. I could see my breath in the air despite the store being climate controlled. Then I heard a voice right behind me as clear as day. "Will you play with me?" It was a little girl's voice, no more than 6 or 7 years old. I turned around slowly, but there was no one there, just an empty aisle stretching toward the toy department. I put in my 2 weeks' notice. The next day, on my final night, as I was leaving the store for the last time, I heard that same giggle coming from the electronics section. I didn't look back. From what I've heard from former coworkers, the strange occurrences continue to this day. New employees are rarely told about the store ghost until they experience something themselves. Management has brought in technicians multiple times to check the electrical systems, the climate control, everything that could explain the bizarre events. They never find anything wrong. Sometimes I drive past a Walmart late at night and look at the brightly lit building, standing alone at the edge of the desert. I always wonder if she's still there, waiting for someone to play with her in those long, empty hours between midnight and dawn.